Welcome to Quarantine Zone, a podcast for HBO's The Last of Us. We're your hosts, Andrew Sorsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Walken.
We just watched the final episode of The Last of Us first season, titled Look for the Light. We assume you have as well. Total spoilers ahead. Let's dive into the after talk. Before we do, we've got some online spots where you can get in contact with us. You can write to us or email us a voice memo at quarantinezonepod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at QZPod. Add us on iTunes. Like us, please leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. But the best thing you can do really is spread the word. Tell your friends. This episode, Look for the Light, is written by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann and directed by Ellie Abbasi, who directed the previous episode, When We Are in Need. Dwayne, can you please give us a recap of this episode?
Yes, this recap's pretty straightforward. We see Anna, Ellie's mother, give birth to her while fighting for her life against the infected. After realizing that she's bit, she cuts the umbilical cord. Marlene arrives. She takes Ellie. And she kills the infected Anna at her own request. We jump to Ellie on the road with Joel, and she is melancholy. The two come to a city, and Ellie finds a colony of giraffes, bringing her some much-needed joy. Ellie and Joel talk. He suggests they go back to Tommy's, and she says no, they need to finish this. During the discussion, Joel admits he attempted suicide when Sarah died. Ellie and Joel are then attacked by a Firefly patrol, where they're separated. Marlene appears, having made it across the country at great cost and loss of life to her organization. She regretfully reveals to Joel that Ellie is to be dissected so that the part of her body that gives her immunity can be replicated and used to give immunity for everyone. Joel does not like the idea of killing Ellie and proceeds to end the lives of everyone who stands in his way. Before Joel can escape with an anesthetized Ellie, Marlene confronts him and asks him if stealing Ellie is what Ellie, would want. Claiming that Marlene would just come after him and Ellie, he kills Marlene as she pleads for her life. We later see Joel in the escape vehicle with Ellie, and he tells her lies, that their doctors had performed tests on her only, and that there are dozens more people with immunity like hers, and that the doctors had given up on the cure, and that raiders attacked the hospital, and that they had to leave Ellie's clothes behind. She was in a hospital gown. As they approach Jackson Hole, where Tommy lives, Ellie confesses the first person she killed was, in fact, her friend and romantic interest, Riley. Joel tries to give her a pep talk with words, but Ellie interrupts him to ask him to swear that the story that he told her about the Fireflies and running away from the Raiders was all true. Joel looks at her and he lies and says yes. In fact, it was all true. And Ellie seems to accept his words. And that is the end of the episode. When you read the actual recap, it doesn't seem like much happened, which just goes to show you how great the show is, because it doesn't have to happen plot-wise for you to end up with all the incredible feelings that we're all feeling after this episode.
Right. It's a tidy, it was a 45-minute episode compared to the hour or so episodes of previously in the season. And some of them, went hour and a half or hour 20 minutes. So
yeah.
And I was actually wondering, first of all, before I get into it, let me ask you, Dwayne, what were your initial impressions?
I think it's called Look for the Light because Joel goes crazy dark in this episode. I think there was a lot of I don't want to call it fan service. I don't think it's fan service. I don't think people were looking. I think if you're a casual viewer, you were not looking for that level of death and destruction to enjoy the show. But I do think that it delivers on two themes that we've seen so far. The first theme is that, yes, the infected are dangerous, right? Every single time you fight with an infected, people get infected. The infected are dangerous. So we know this. But the theme of the show is that you're not really worried about the infected. You're worried about what people do in the absence of society, right? That's a big theme. Like, everyone that's not infected is just so much more dangerous. And it delivers on that when you see what's happening with this idea that we're going to chop Ellie up. The second thing it delivers on is we have been watching this show, and in the very first episode, Tess is captured and some guy is talking to her, and he's worried about it. He's like, I got to kill you and hide your body so that no one thinks that I killed you because I don't want Joel to be mad at me because I'm scared of Joel. Like, I'm deathly afraid of Joel. And you're like, okay, well, I guess Joel's a badass. And then for the next couple of episodes, you're like, okay, I mean, Joel's tough, but is he really that bad of an ass?
Right.
And then you got another boost with Tommy, right? Tommy being like, Joel, we killed those people, we murdered people, right? And then you get another boost when Marlene says shit like, you're the one person I didn't want to ever owe anything.
Yeah.
And then it's like pay dirt. And you realize that, like, Joel in the form of Pedro Pascal is effectively death incarnate. You know, like you put a weapon in his hands and God help you. And so I think it really delivered on that foundation. It'd been building it and it was subtle. It was a subtle foundation that was being, dug deep. And then suddenly when Joel's doing all this stuff in this episode, it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like, where did this come from? It feels like they've been telling us the whole time and we should have been prepared for this if we haven't been. And to me, that's like one of the hallmarks of a great show. It doesn't have to be a mystery.
Yeah.
But the fact that when you watch it again, you understand that the foundation was being built the whole time. And yeah, I thought there was a lot to love in this episode. I didn't love parts of it, but I thought there was a lot to love. Tosin, what about you?
I enjoyed this episode. For me, it was very, very similar to the game, which I had just finished, hours before. So interesting seeing the similarities. I think sort of similar to the game, the pacing at the end is a bit rapid, and by that I kind of mean like, it ended and you kind of felt like
you need more.
You needed more. And it's okay not necessarily having closure and having that unsatisfactory feel, but I just really wish they could have extended it a little bit more, like given me another sort of taste or glimpse.
Mm-hmm. But I wanted resolution, like a little bit more resolution. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, but overall I enjoyed it. I mean, I thought it showed a lot of the themes that we've seen throughout the course of the season. You see the development of the characters, and you see some characters go back to their old ways. So I thought it was elegantly done, and I'm glad the season's in a wrap, that they ended it just there. So I think can't complain.
Yeah, Andy, what about you? Particularly Andy, how did you feel this season wrapped up?
Well, I think, I've been really delighted this entire time with, initially when, and we'll talk largely about the entire season, as we get to the end of this podcast, but just about how this season wrapped up. I think it wrapped up very elegantly. I was happy with what they decided to keep and what they decided to leave out from the game, and I'm happy overall with the guiding the guiding principle of the showrunners, which is basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and just do exactly that. Like it's kind of weird because it is in a way very much like a direct translation from one medium to the next. In a lot of ways, in other instances, that would not necessarily be a good thing. I'm thinking of, like, for example, sometimes you'll see these live action adaptation of classic animated features, and and you wonder why do they bother, because they're basically just they're not adding anything to it. I'll tell you, I work in animation. In animation, there is a process that we call plussing, which is essentially there are many different stages of animation, and at every stage where you go from like still drawings on a page to the actual animated final product, your intent is to plus, to give something additive to the previous process. You're going to plus the drawings to get it to the rough animation. You're going to plus the rough animation to get it to the final animation.
Layering on.
Yeah, you want to, but you always want to add more, to improve upon what came before. And I would say that this episode, and as the season wraps up, has plussed what came before it in the video game.
Right.
But we should get into some of the more detailed things about this episode.
I mean, I just really liked what you had to say there. I think it's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just make an adaptation to make it. You got to make an adaptation that is going to satisfy the new medium and really not leave behind the old medium, right?
Right.
I think video games are a special case. We talked about it. Video games, like those animated shows that you talked about, often can come across on screen poorly. And I think moving to the television format was a big win in this case. But I also feel as if there are times when, because it's a video game and, you have movement and motion and all, you can just take it, right? And it doesn't have to be like that movie Doom where they had that like extended first person shooter sequence. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I really feel like they are focused on plussing, to use your term, the emotional connectivity of the characters.
Yeah.
More than trying to like kind of show off how some gameplay can work on screen. Like when you watch like Hitman and you see them jump in funny ways so the bullets twist in the air in ways that science doesn't work with. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're like, if there's anything, Joel likes to talk about how he's not a good shot. I mean, he talks about how he's not a good shot in the first episode. He talks about how he's not a good shot in the last episode. He couldn't even shoot his own head off. And meanwhile, he's out there taking out, I don't know what his body count was. I'd love it if someone told me. I think plussing is a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I think
I'm not non-plussed. I'm plus.
I think in Joel's case, he's giving a little false humility, because I think by extent of his experience, he is a terrific shot.
Like if you look at the numbers, he's fine, but he may not be satisfied with his own marksmanship.
Right.
But given the amount of bullets he's fired, his hit rate is probably right.
But in context, relative to everyone else, he's actually a fantastic shot. He shoots everything that he goes for, pretty much.
Yeah, he hits. Yeah.
He hits everything he goes for.
Except for himself.
Except for himself.
Right, exactly. Except for himself. Dude, Marlene's death? I mean, come on. Oh.
Yeah.
She's like, no, wait, she's like pleading. He's like, I mean, it wasn't, it didn't even feel that cold-blooded. It just felt like every time I've ever watched a movie, someone has made the mistake of sparing someone because of a plea. And then, like, even, don't hurt me. And then they like pull out a gun and kill him. He's like, he just doesn't, there's no time for that. There's no drama.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you'll come after me. Poop.
Well, let's talk about that. So that's kind of like the elephant in the room of this episode is Joel's motivation and what drives him and how he acts in this situation where he's basically rescuing Ellie. It's a kind of a moral quandary, right? Like, first of all, you have the moral quandary of one person versus the entirety of humanity, rescuing the entirety of humanity. And I think, honestly, as a parent, and I'm sure, Dwayne, you can corroborate as a parent, that there's no conflict whatsoever. Like, you will burn down the whole world for your kids. So
yeah, I mean, it's really funny you say that. There's this comedian, man, I wish I had his name on hand. He's a Korean and African American comedian. My wife linked me to him because we have a son and a daughter, and he had this great joke. He was like, I have a son, and I would die for my son. I would die for him. I'd hold him, and the car would hit me, and I would die.
Sure,
and my son would be alive, but I would kill for my daughter.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's just like,
yes.
It's just like when it comes to that, like last episode, he called her baby girl, which makes me accept her.
Yeah.
And this episode, he simply was not going to give that up. So I was left feeling like the moral quandary, the ethics of it all.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the ethics of the surgery are kind of janky in our world, but we don't live in our world. But the moral quandary of like, okay, Ellie will die, but like we think humanity will be saved. You know, there's obviously like big problems there, right? Especially because, is that actually true? The Fireflies are pretty hardcore about their belief and their dogma. It's unclear if the Fireflies have the right solutions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's unclear if the Fireflies have all the right science. I'm not impressed by I'm not as impressed by the Fireflies as I am by like Tommy and Maria's situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you want to talk about, you don't like Fredra, that's fine, but look at the utopia these guys made out there.
Right.
So I'm just not, you can't trust the Fireflies. Tommy joined up with the Fireflies, and now Tommy's not with them, and Tommy's a joiner. So they're not reliable narrators. So when Marlene is like, you know, we're going to kill her and everybody else will be fine, and you're Joel, you're like, you know, on the one hand, you're like, I don't care what you think is going to happen. You can't kill her. But on the other hand, you're like, I don't even know if you're telling the truth.
In that moment, Joel becomes what he was always born to be and what he's always been, that sort of protector, the killer that protects the individuals that he's with, the sort of hitman goon that we know that he is. And I think what was really interesting to me is that if you recall in episode 5 where we meet Kathleen, and Kathleen is having that conversation with you know, the what's his name?
Henry.
Henry. She says, you think the whole world revolves around him, that he's worth everything. And if you remember back in that episode, we see Joel processing this. The camera focuses on Joel, and you see him thinking about it. Well, now we know what his decision is. We know his decision is, yes, the world does revolve around Ellie, and she is worth everything. She is worth protecting, and I'm the guy to do it. So I think this is exactly what he needs and what he was born to. And although it was sort of ruthless, as you well explained, Dwayne, there was no ruth. There was no ruth. It was just ruthlessness. I think you're absolutely right. And I also feel like it's one of those things where it's like, the world is all about Ellie for me. My world is all about Ellie. And he's also thinking that, like, the reason why he can let go like that is because if he doesn't do anything, Ellie's dead anyway. And if Ellie's dead, he's going to shoot himself again. Right? Yeah.
So he has nothing to lose. Like, the thing that Pascal was portraying was a man who had nothing to lose and everything to gain by becoming, I mean, he was an if you're the Fireflies, this man was an active shooter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, y'all got guns, but you weren't going to go and get around. I mean, he was killing people that were on the ground. He was killing people that had their hands up. Like, if you were there, you were dead. If he saw you, he was killing people who were running away. You know what I mean? At first, you're like, okay, the Fireflies are a disciplined organization. You know, he's like, where are they keeping her? And the guy's like, you know, screw you. Yeah. And he's like, I'm going to shoot you. Like, wow, the Fireflies. He's going to die for his belief in the cause and saving and everything like that. But then there's a point at which you just see people running away and holding their hands up and saying, no, please. Right. And he's just taking them out anyway. He's just putting them down like rabid dogs. So he had nothing to lose. Nothing.
Anyone that he considers a threat, right?
Yes, exactly. Because he's like, I can't walk by you and have you come behind me.
We've seen this before, right? When he killed the raider, the guy who was pleading for his life, and he had Ellie look away.
Right.
Right.
Brian.
It's not. You know, once again, it is within.
It's not personal, almost.
Yeah.
Right, but
it's not personal.
It's more than that, though. This is something. When Joel realizes that he's got to rescue Ellie, something in him snaps. And
Yes.
he disassociates. He dissociates. He becomes blind with this singular focus, and that focus doesn't take into account the cost, the human cost of anyone else's life. He literally becomes a killing machine. Like, did you notice that during that whole sequence, like the music was muted, and he
was in the zone.
He was in the zone, right?
It was everyone was just there as a target. They were targets, and also that moment was really well done. He's on his hands and knees, and he realizes what's going to happen, and he realizes he doesn't have any power, and it's almost as if he's knocked down, and he makes this decision, and the decision involves him realizing that the only way he's going to get the upper hand is if they believe he's broken. So he's on his hands and knees. And he's like broken. Like there's a guy over him with the butt of his gun who'll hit him again, right? And there's another guy with another gun, and Marlene is standing over him. All the status in like traditional, blocking and like theater is above Joel. But when you look at his face, there's a moment that was there's an inflection point, and he's basically like, "You think you have the status, but I'm gonna turn that around on you." And you're like, I remember thinking like, oh shit, there was that moment like, oh no.
But I also think even Joel isn't completely conscious of what's come over him, right? He is just so totally singularly focused on saving Ellie and getting the hell out of there.
In one moment, I felt like it was a different person because there's this like weird smirk that crawls over his face almost involuntarily after he like wipes somebody out. The camera like pans across his face, and it's almost as if like there's another person in there that's like, it's the killing Joel.
And this is exactly the thing that Tess knew that she could manipulate about Joel, and knew that she could direct him to be a killing machine if she needed to. And that's why, she was telling her captors back in episode 1, I'll just tell him that I got jumped and had the thing stolen, and you don't have to worry about it,
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and that's also, it's interesting, right? Because you can see in Joel's head, he's like, I have one dead daughter, and I'm not going to have another, and so he's slowing down. In fact, that scene in the hospital, it reminded me of a martial arts movie, and I'm blanking on the title right now, but it's going to come back to me. But maybe one of you guys know it.
Speaking of blanking, I just got to say, Michael Yo is the name of the comedian I was talking about before when I blanked on his name, Michael Yo. But maybe one of us knows it. Tell us about this movie. Maybe one of us knows.
So there is this scene in this movie. It's a martial arts movie where a lot of crazy fighting in a hospital. And there's a scene where the guy is fighting with a baby in his hand.
Oh, yeah.
I believe the baby puts out the fire. Hard boiled. That's what it's called, right?
That's right.
So I was reminded of
John Woo.
With a lot of
perfect John Woo film. Yeah.
Slow mo, like things flying up in the air, people dying left and right in the hospital. I would recommend checking that movie out too.
Yeah. And, the thing about the scene in the hospital was that there's a moment when he walks by a sign. And it says pediatric surgery. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
And it was a great reminder that Ellie's 14.
Sure.
He's not going to the surgery wing. He has to go to the children's surgery wing.
Sure.
Right?
Also interesting that the Fireflies have decided to follow the rules still of the structure of the building, even though there are no like, who cares?
Oh yes, make sure we do the surgery in the pediatric wing of this abandoned hospital.
But they're doctors, right? So it's like doctors.
I can only surmise that perhaps some of the tools are smaller in the pediatric wing. But the thing that was so creepy about that was, like, Ellie is theoretically going to save the entire world if she's killed. And what world was that? It was a world where this hospital existed. There was a pediatric version in the area, and the pediatric version, people took care to draw like these. There was a mural with monkeys and zebras and things, and like the monkey, and like it just goes to show that they were like trying to take care of their kids. Ellie had just seen a colony of giraffes, right?
Mm-hmm.
She'd never seen that. She presumably never saw real monkeys and zebras. And so as Joel's walking by that, I'm just constantly reminded that Ellie is a child, right? And then I'm also thinking about other things like, yes, this could save humanity, taking out whatever Ellie had in her body. But it is a tragedy of informed consent if you trick her into going under anesthesia and then you kill her, right? That's another thing. So I'm not saying Joel was walking around being like, oh, she didn't have informed consent, I have to go, kill, whatever. But I do think that the Fireflies, despite their heroic ambitions, were being pretty, like Andy said, like they're going to pay attention and follow the rules of the hospital with the pediatric wing, but they're not going to follow the rules of informed consent and just like basically lie to Ellie, she'll go under and she'll never wake up. Now that was janky, but can we just talk about how?
Yeah, Joel was just looking for the paperwork. That's all he was doing.
He walks in and the doctor's like, I won't let you stop this. And he's like, boom, you're dead. I was like, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you're going to, boom, you're dead. And the nurses were like, I'm surprised he didn't kill the nurses or like his attendant, the other doctors.
I don't think he perceived them as a threat.
I guess so. He's like the Borg, like no threat. I'll keep on going. But I mean, also like how tense were you during that, when he walks into the elevator?
Yeah.
How tense were you? Because for me, I'm looking at him and I'm like, how is he going to hold a weapon while he holds the unconscious girl?
Right.
Like, is it going to open up and they're just going to get hit by a hail of bullets? And I played the game.
Yeah.
I know what's supposed to happen. But I still felt that tension. I was like, what if they, because when you're watching these movies, whether it's plus or non-plus, these shows, you don't know how they're going to turn it. Like, I was watching Glorious Bastards all those years ago. I didn't expect the end of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, who knows how they would have changed the events. But then when you find out later that he had a gun under the inside of Ellie's knees where he's holding her, and he could take out Marlene that way, it's just like, oh my gosh, Joel.
He's carrying her very lovingly and very gentle, similar to how carrying his daughter, right?
Yeah.
So they set it up similar in the game. I give the game a lot of props for the directorial decisions, because in the game you see him holding the daughter, you see the forward facing camera shot similar to what they do here, and you think if this is the first time you're playing, oh no, this could happen to him again, where someone's gonna have a gun out coming out of the elevator and shoot her, right? Similar to what happened before, but this time he takes the offensive, right? When he was previously carrying his daughter, he didn't have a gun on him at all. This time
he was defensive. He's like, no, we're not sick. Don't shoot. We're not sick. He's pleading, and this time he's like, I'm done pleading.
Yeah, this time I'm on the offense. This time, instead of me trying to hold and save someone, I'm holding them, but with a gun to protect them.
So a couple things here, like one of the plot holes that I had in this adaptation, which I also had in the game, is that I'm not entirely sure why the immune cordyceps in Ellie couldn't just be extracted from a biopsy and not have to result in completely killing her. Like, they couldn't just take a sample of the cordyceps from her brain and then grow that in the lab. I'm not entirely sure why she had to die, but I mean, that's...
And we've seen the exploratory brain surgery where, like you've got like a musician or something and they're playing, they're under local anesthesia, their brain is open, the surgeons are prodding their brain while they're talking or playing the violin. And when they took a certain part, the violin playing goes weird or their talking goes weird. So like, okay, we can't cut there, but we can cut here, right? Mapping. I mean, they could have done that. I don't know if they lacked the resources to do that with Ellie because, it's a post-apocalyptic time. But, that technology would have been old hat by then. So I don't know. Sure. I think you're right. There is an issue there. I also think that one weird thing is that the Marlene connection. So Tosin, you mentioned the Marlene connection early when we were discussing recording this. And I want you to get into that. But before you do, I do want to say that to me, it was great dramatic irony that, Joel's on the floor saying, please, you don't understand. And Marlene, who's keeping him from his raison d'etre, Ellie has become his reason for living.
Sure.
She's keeping him from Ellie. She's keeping him from his reason for living. But Marlene herself is the reason that Ellie's alive. Right? So, Marlene has caused Ellie to be there, for him to fall in love with Ellie, and now Marlene's trying to take Ellie away. And for me, that's a fantastic irony. Yeah, Marlene, the person who brought her through this world, is now the one pulling her back, and he's not having it.
It's a rough world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that connection, and that'll bring us to the beginning of the episode. So, and we had a little bit of this discussion offline before we started this podcast, but Marlene is in a sense Ellie's protector from birth, but I think that makes it's a different dynamic that Marlene has with Ellie than being her mother, and definitely than being a guardian. And the difference is
yes. Go on.
The difference is that Marlene agreed to take and protect Ellie once Anna died, but what she did was she knew that Ellie, that there was no way that the Fireflies could raise this child and continue their Firefly, resistance action. So she took Ellie and placed her within Fedra, and then sort of just watched on from afar. So there is a level of emotional investment that was not there. She still took care of her. She kept her promise to Anna to watch over her, but she didn't raise Ellie.
It's so interesting that you say that, because on some level, it just goes to show that the Fireflies are a really legit organization. At first, you think, oh, they're Fireflies, whatever. But I mean, they dropped Ellie in here, kept an eye on her.
Yeah.
And they were going to recruit her in a way too, right? So they recruited Riley from Fedra.
Yeah.
And Riley, as much as Riley was ready to get over to Georgia, Georgia Firefly area, that you can't deny that Riley was recruiting Ellie right then and right there. Come with me. Sure. You know what I mean? Drop everything. So they're an organization, and they sent her. They were fine with Riley talking to Ellie and all that stuff. So I mean, it's one of those things where the Fireflies are a straight up powerful organization. Yeah, they put Ellie in there, but what they could have done, and they didn't do, Marlene could have embedded herself in Boston quarantine zone. Hi, this is my daughter, or my my chosen daughter, whatever. And I'm just gonna live that Fedra life with my daughter here, and I'll be a sleeper agent for the Fireflies.
Yeah,
they could have done that, but they didn't do it, and that goes right back to your point that she cared for Ellie because she cared for Anna.
Yeah,
but she didn't the day to day, and the whole thing about parenting is that it's a day to day slog. You know what I mean? Every day feels like a million years, and then every year feels like yesterday.
I guess where I'm unclear about that is, I don't think anywhere in the text it tells us that. So we know in the text that Marlene gave Ellie to Fedra at some point, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know when that point is.
Well, you remember
it's got to be relatively early, because when Riley confronts, at least in the TV continuum, when Riley confronts Ellie about leaving Fedra, she's like, I mean, we're Fedra. When Riley is in class when she's in earlier that episode, when she's in the room with Quan, and he's like, hey, you could either become like a leader here, or you can become a grunt here. She has no idea about like leaving to join Fedra or anything like that. You know what I mean? So like, it had to be early enough for her to be indoctrinated. I don't know when that happens, but I mean, they give her 3 squares a day.
But I mean, in the same sense that Joel has gone, is the father of Ellie, right? Joel sees himself as a father. That's the same extent that Marlene could have, quote unquote, been a mother from Marlene's perspective, not necessarily.
You got a good point there. You got a really good point there.
Like there.
I mean, yeah, because how Joel and Ellie have been together, generously speaking, 4 or 5 months, probably 2-3 months, maybe, that kind of thing.
Over a few seasons, like a year, yeah.
But still, right? Like a year.
But yeah, so if Marlene could have been
anything,
right? So like Marlene could have been more fundamental to her early child growth. That's true.
I don't buy that though, because the first time we see Ellie, she's being held captive by the Fireflies, right? And the dynamic between Ellie and Marlene then was not familial. It was cordial. It was kind of like, I know that she has my best interest at heart. Maybe. I mean, They were giving her like good stuff. She had fancy sandwiches. Like, I don't know that everybody that the Fireflies is going to capture when they use as an asset gets all that stuff. Right.
But Marlene might have like pulled whatever string she had to make sure Ellie was as comfortable as possible. And also, let's face it.
Yeah. Ellie even asks her that, hey, are you my mother? Right? Ellie asks her that question.
Oh, that's not a bad question. Yeah.
In that episode.
In that episode, one thing that's really interesting is that, and I want to go back to "Are You My Mother?" But is it would Ellie have even survived her initial encounter with whatever Fireflies found her after Riley's death if Marlene hadn't vouched for her, right? Because if you showed someone that you got bit, and you weren't healed yet, they'd take you out.
Yeah.
But because she knows Marlene, and because Marlene suspects that Anna wasn't telling the truth when it comes to the circumstances of her birth and getting bit herself, it's just unclear. That Ellie would have been around if Marlene hadn't stepped in for her, which is, if not a maternal thing, Tosin, it's kind of like an avuncular thing, an auntie thing. Like a godmother, a guardian angel, that kind of thing. So I feel like you both have really good points. Andy's point that she's not like the day-to-day parent, and your point that she is looking out for her. And I think you cited some stuff outside the text from like the showrunners or whatever. But I just feel like it's like one of those things where the Marlene-Ellie relationship is one that they didn't have time to explore, obviously, because all the episodes are so tight. But really, we could have had a little bit more time there.
And even outside of the text, when you look at the game itself, in the game there's these secret recorders that you find that Marlene, this is actually in the hospital scene, that Marlene has taped herself, and she talks about this angst of like, hey, I raised this girl. Now, once again, that's in the game, and so that's a different world, but that's how they try to build that tension for that final scene, and kind of build that tension to show that Marlene and Joel are two sides of the same coin, to be honest. And all the individuals that we see throughout this course of the show are similar, where you've got Henry, right, and his brother, and does he sacrifice his brother for the good of someone else's brother? Like, who do you sacrifice? What are the decisions you make? What it makes a leader? And those sort of compelling questions. And ultimately what we find out is it's all a gray area, and the truth is a gray area too, of what is the best thing to tell people at the right time, right? Marlene lied to Ellie that she was going to come out of that surgery fine. And Joel lied to Ellie too. So maybe the question is for you: do you guys lie to your kids all the time?
I mean, it's like never, don't lie to the ones you love, kind of thing. I mean, I try not to lie to my kids. I try not to. I mean, we don't do the whole Santa Claus thing, whatever. The only thing about lying is that it takes a lot of work. It's easy the first time you do it, but to maintain the story, what a tangled web we weave, and we're whatever deceived, that kind of thing. I can't deal with that stress. I have too much other stress.
But also, ultimately, as parents, we will do whatever it takes to protect our children. And
yes, that's true.
And I think if we're talking about that, Joel's lie to Ellie. So Ellie
she gets put at peace with his lie. She gets put down with Marlene's lie. There's a big difference there.
We never got to see Ellie's conversation with Marlene before the surgery. But
we know Marlene lied to her. She goes, she thinks she's never going to feel a thing. Like,
right,
I don't know.
But we don't know what transaction they had together about that. That's
I was left with the
speculation.
impression that Ellie was thinking that she was going to be fine.
Sure.
Not Ellie.
Sure.
Hey, Ellie, we're going to put you down, take your brain apart, and you won't die. So, like, Marlene was like, less honest with Ellie, sure.
She omitted the details.
Like the details, she's about to kill her.
Yes, yes. But, and also, like, there's that whole moral quandary where Joel tells Marlene that how much Ellie means to him, and Marlene says that she means as much to me as well. But I think the difference there is that Marlene is still a committed leader of a group whose goal is to save society, essentially.
Yes.
And I think she and Joel may have started off at a point where the cause was as important as the cause trumped what you're willing to do for that cause, and I
like the ends justify the means.
The ends justify the means, and it took Joel's relationship with Ellie to shift his focus to the other way around, where it's basically like the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many in this case.
Well, needs of the one, which is in fact Joel, not Ellie, right?
Because Joel
was the guy. Right. He said, I was the guy who shot and missed, and we find throughout this episode that, Ellie has healed his wounds figuratively and literally.
Yeah.
The show, right. So.
Also, Joel was like, "Let's go back to Tommy," and she's like, "No, we have to finish this." And he's like, oh, "Okay."
Yeah.
I support that. I support that understanding, Tosin, totally. Marlene, for all that she might have been like, I'm gonna save. I need to kill Ellie to save the world. She did lie to Ellie's mother. She told Ellie's mother that she's like, "I can't do it," and she's like, "Okay, I'll do it." And that it was protecting Ellie from harm.
Yes, I mean, I don't think that was a lie so much as
lies. At the end of the day, Marlene should have been like, "Look, I don't know what you need to do, doctors, but you got to find a way to keep her alive after this is all over."
Right.
That's what happens in movies with unreasonable characters all the time. Right?
If you're talking about the initial backstory incident between
yes.
So I think what was going on there was. This is Marlene's best friend, basically, from childhood. So her initial reaction is, I can't do it. But then, logically, she realizes that I don't really have a choice. She's going to be infected and she's going to start, become a threat. So I have to kill her, even though I do not want to do it. She tells Anna, I can't do it.
No, I mean, like, she's like, Anna was like, obviously shoot me. I don't want to become a threat. But Anna was like, you have to protect Ellie. Her name is Ellie. You have to protect her. And Marlene agreed. And the fact that Marlene's like, I agreed to Anna. But you know what? Anna's dead and Ellie's body can save the world. So forget it. Like, yes, again, the Fireflies are disciplined.
Yes.
But so, she lied. At the end of the day,
yes,
she lied to her best friend.
Correct.
She lied.
In the long run, 14 years later, yes. But
Yes.
but yeah, that is the distinction between Marlene and Joel here, is that Joel is not willing to sacrifice Ellie, and Marlene is, because she is still deep in the cause, and Joel is all about I've completely set aside I've set aside my initial stance of you are just cargo and now you are everything to me.
I mean, he's walking around talking about Sarah. Remember the first several episodes with Sarah? When he was with Maria, I learned about Sarah, like, don't ever talk about her, whatever. He's talking about how Sarah might like her, and there's some subtext of, like, Sarah might act, like, she might like Sarah back, you know what I mean? When you're watching that scene, you're like, oh, maybe they would have that kind of stuff. She was more girly than you are. He was doing direct comparisons and contrasts. And when you do those contrasts, when you say, I love you and I love this person that's gone now, the contrasts show that you don't love the new person because they're like the old person. You love the new person because of who they are, distinct from the old person. Sure. Which is almost a more meaningful way of saying I love you, right? So he's like, you're not the same. I love you anyway. I'm going to... And we know that by telling Ellie about Sarah, that's a way that Joel shows love and kindness and everything. So it's one of those things where, you're right. Joel was fully committed to Ellie, so much to the point where he was emotionally naked around her.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Joel was opening up, right? And I think he was also going full father. Hey, do you want to learn how to play guitar? Treating her as a child, asking her to the joke books, trying to get her to open up and get out of her shell based off of the trauma that she's had.
The trauma of being like raped as a child by a pedophilic cult leader. Yeah.
Yep. Right. And I think, to be honest, at the end of the episode, one of the reasons why Ellie asks him that question is she realized that Joel has been open with her and has told her about the story of his near suicide, and so now she wants to be a little bit more open with him as they move into this new section of their journey, right? They've completed
a new phase,
a new phase, right? They see the town ahead, and so that's where she like, hey, as we go into this new phase, what's the truth?
Right.
And there's a big question on whether or not, we know that she accepts it, but does she really accept it?
No, see, this is my...
Yes. Tosin, right there, it's like, is she asking because she wants to know the truth? Like, when she asked the question, is she asking because she's like, I want you to tell me the truth, or is she asking because it doesn't matter what he says? It was just like, her acting in that moment. I don't know how many takes it took. I don't know what process she used. But the ambiguity with which she accepted his last lie was incredible.
Yes.
Because so you don't know if it's a matter of her faith in him, I believe you.
Yeah.
Or you don't know if it's like, I don't believe you, I must escape from you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or I don't know if the next episode we're going to see a flashback of her like being drugged but hearing everything as she's being drugged. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
so in my mind, Ellie knows beyond the shadow of a doubt that Joel is lying to her about the fireflies.
Through his damn teeth.
Right. But she is choosing to believe, or at least accept, what he says. Because if she were to admit the truth openly to herself, it's going to be a lot more complicated considering their relationship, because this is a man,
and considering her like the way she thought about herself.
Yes,
as a potentially saving humanity.
So she has to sort of she asks him the question, I think, to find out how he will react, to find out what he will tell her, even though she knows that he's lying. So, so essentially the question is, are you going to continue to be truthful to me, or are you going to lie about this heinous act that you've done, which is to kill so many other people for my sake. And he says, I'm telling you the truth. I swear that everything I said was true. And so she has to sort of like, okay, I guess I have to accept that, but it is going to color their dynamic in a different way from here on out.
But here's my question. I mean, again, Ellie is 14. Joel has been with her for however long, or maybe she's 15 now. It's been a year, whatever timeline. But my point is, if you're a girl in the apocalypse, and the only place you know is safe is one run by this dude's, sister-in-law, do you have a choice? Like, on some level, she doesn't have any power right then. Like, they're going to Jackson Hole.
I think it's less about the power dynamic, though.
She doesn't have any agencies, I guess I'm saying.
She knows she can trust him to protect her with his life. We already know that. It's all about, not about the power dynamic as it is about trust. It is about, like, what...
But does she want that post David? Post David, she's kind of gone through her baptism, right? She kind of was like, the whole thing about the episode with David is that he didn't save her. She saved herself. She might no longer, just as he becomes her father, she might not need a father.
Yeah,
this is true.
Before he became her father, she really wanted it. But then she's with this David guy, and David takes away a huge chunk of her innocence. And when she made the personal decision to go to the Fireflies, come what may, when it came to her health, and he took that away from her, that agency away from her, how does she feel about that?
Yeah.
And on top of that,
for sure,
does she have any real choice but to go to Jackson Hole and play the role of, like, I'm so happy I'm here, when she, her best friend died from this disease. Not only her best friend, obviously, her potential lover, her love interest died from the infected, and that can give her motivation to do whatever it takes to stop that from happening to anybody else. So I just feel like there's a lot of weird pressures, weird forces going on here in terms of, like, Joel's, again, a dangerous man. Do you want to piss off a dangerous man? Even if he was protecting you, if you're Ellie, you're like, is he going to flip on me? Like, what's happening? All these things. So I don't think
she's... I think
there's some duress is all I'm saying. There's some like level of duress
for sure
that she might be feeling, because when a person's that dangerous, do you want to piss them off?
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that she has grown up, right? She even tells Joel, oh, this is the way we're going to navigate around here, which is precisely what Joel knows. And so she has...
Homegirl learned, right?
Yeah,
she's effectively Joel now.
Yeah, and I do actually believe... and, this is just my own thoughts around this, but I do believe when she's talking to Joel about, hey, we need to finish this fight, we need to get to the end of this, like, hey, everyone has this sort of end that she talks about because she had that conversation with her best friend. I do feel like she's ready to self-sacrifice. So I think, not that the game
did she get the choice her, is the question. Yeah,
exactly. The game never tells you that what she decides or if she had a choice, and in this case she also didn't have a choice. But I do actually think that Marlene is right, that if Ellie was given the choice, I do think that she would self-sacrifice. Now,
and
once
that's
again, that's
so good
my
about the
opinion,
show.
But yeah.
But no, I mean, that's so, like, they're giving you multiple ways to interpret it. They don't tell you what Marlene would have said. Does Ellie really want this, whatever? And so we're stuck wondering what Ellie wants without ever having seen it, without ever having known. And this is, like, the power of the show, this idea that, like, you don't have to say it out loud. But there's a couple ways this could go. There's a couple ways that this could go, and you don't know what way she'd take. But we do know that her intent, right, her wish for herself, was to use her body to save humanity.
Yes,
right. Her body, on some level, her choice, We just don't know what choice she had when she was put under anesthesia. Right. And that is a compelling mystery, because that would make it easy, right?
Sure, sure.
It would make it so easy. But she was kicking and screaming when they put her under anesthesia. But she had just gone out, right? When they got her, like, oh, she's under. And then Joel had to get her again. So it was just, there's no way to know.
In that garage sequence, Joel was right when talking to Marlene that Ellie's fate wasn't for Marlene to decide, but Marlene was right that it's not for Joel to decide either, and Joel did make that decision for her without her consent. Joel decided to save Ellie's life.
That is the line.
Without
You're right. That is the line. Say that sentence one more time for me, Andy.
Joel decided to save Ellie's life without her consent.
It's paternal, but it's patriarchal too.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. And because everything is all about sacrifice and those who sacrificed along the way to get here, I think it is although Ellie has accepted it for what it is, there's no turning back. She realizes that, hey, the Fireflies, like that organization or Marlene, the folks who are looking, are no more, and that there's nothing that she can do about them. They're dead. I do think that it makes for a compelling way to fade out a series, both the game and the show. So I'm glad they didn't change that. I'm glad it gives us what I was going to say, water cooler. Is that what they call it?
Water cooler discussion. Yeah. Podcast discussion
from an era before streaming. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, Joel basically explains that he was able to push through despite Sarah's death.
Uh-huh.
And the question is, like, how? And then he doesn't answer with words. He just looks at her. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He just straight up looks at her. And so it's like, it's yeah, I mean, this guy. I mean, it's kind of Ellie's show.
Sure, it is absolutely Ellie's show.
It's Ellie's show, and then Joel. He's not just like a weapon or anything, but it became his show for a moment, and you got to again see this, like, just like with Bob and Frank. A lot of TV doesn't let you see men being emotionally vulnerable. I mentioned emotionally naked earlier, and. Joel in the form of Pedro Pascal, he's put too much into Ellie to lose her, for her to go.
Yeah.
And that's just really what it comes down to. And Ellie just has to realize that. And I think when it comes to part 2, which I have not played but must play before it shows up on HBO, we're going to find out how Ellie deals with that, right?
For sure. Yeah. I just want to talk about a couple things more. There's a couple things I wanted to cover before we move on to the next segment. One thing that I feel like we have to cover is the prologue, which is not in the game, which is unique to this adaptation. So we start with Anna, and I feel like the reason that we're starting with Anna is Anna is so much a part of who Ellie is. So we need to know where Ellie came from. So we see that Anna is resilient and tenacious, as Ellie would soon be. We see that there's this hereditary legacy that Anna leaves to Ellie in the form of, like, her tenaciousness, her, like, the first thing she says to Ellie is, "You fucking tell him, Ellie." She's cursing, like, right off the bat. We know Ellie curses left and right. So I think
the casting was also fantastic. Not just because the woman playing Anna is Ellie in the show, but also because the moment you look at that actress's face, you know she's related to Ellie.
Yes. So
there's no doubt at all.
So what you're saying is, what you're referring to is Ashley Johnson, the actress who plays Anna, was the voice of Ellie in the video game. And interestingly enough, video game Ellie does not resemble Ashley Johnson, but ironically, Bella Ramsey, who does play Ellie in the show, does resemble Ashley Johnson. So it's like a really tight,
a happy accident.
Yeah,
in the happiest way possible.
Tight casting job.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to bring up, this is like a third rail on this show, so I don't know where this is going to go, but like we notice we notice that when Anna gets bitten, like in every instance of attack that we've seen on this show so far, we don't actually see the moment, that we don't actually focus on the moment when the infected attacks or bites their victim. We just see the immediate aftermath of it. And my belief is
discovered after the fact.
Yes, discovered after the fact. And
the infected always dies, and the person discovers the wound after the infected dies.
Like almost without fail, almost every single instance that we've had on the show. And I believe that is the intent of that, is the showrunners telling us the impact of shock and trauma on in this world. When you're getting attacked by an infected, it's much like I've heard dozens and dozens of accounts of people who have suffered gunshot wounds and knife stabs in conflict, and they don't even realize that they've been stabbed or shot until after the fact. Oh, what's this? I'm bleeding all of a sudden. So, and I think this is their way of expressing that, but in the context of this post-apocalyptic zombie fiction, essentially. And in instance of trauma, not only can you realize that you have been bitten, but especially if you are this close to giving birth, you can not even realize that your child has been born until after the traumatic event is over, after the shock has passed. I know, Dwayne, you do not agree with me on that.
So it's important to have a discussion before the show, because time heals all wounds. And
it wasn't time that healed these wounds, Dwayne.
I will say this. There is a theme of all of these encounters almost feeling like they are from the perspective of the person who got bit. And so in the moment, whatever's happened, they don't recognize it as it happens. Now, it's unclear if that's the case in that early episode, maybe episode 2 with Tess in the museum or whatever.
Yeah.
Because we weren't there during that attack, right. The part where she might have gotten bitten. There were, 2 different zombies, and the zombies were like in different rooms and all that stuff. But for the most part, it's almost as if like the survivors of attacks don't remember getting bitten during their attack because they were so worried about being attacked. And maybe that's what you're referring to. But I find the consistency to be problematic when it comes to my entertainment enjoyment and like the versatility. That said, I didn't love the opening scene. I think it could have been done better. Tosin brought up this idea of Marlene being this mother protector. I would have loved it if it began not with Anna running, but with Marlene bursting through the door and discovering Anna.
Sure.
And then having a heart, like baby's already born.
Sure.
Didn't have to go through all that, but having that heart to heart with her best friend in a way perhaps that mirrored Ellie and Riley, maybe sans the romance, because it's unclear if Marlene and Anna. I mean, clearly Anna was with somebody else, right? But I guess what I'm saying is, I think the emotional note would have been much tighter if it were a Marlene, focused memory. So Anna's bit, yes. Anna's got the baby, yes. Anna lied about when she cut the cord, yes. But it's Marlene experiencing it all. So then we get to the end of the episode, and Marlene's like, you don't know what this is costing me. And then it hits much harder. Like when Marlene dies, I think we're all a little tiny bit shocked that Marlene dies. But I think at the end of the day, we're like, well, if you're in Joel's shoes, she deserved to die. But if Marlene and Anna had a more meaningful exchange in the beginning, and then Joel kills her, I think we would feel a deeper sense of loss, which is kind of the whole point. So I think they could have done that better. I think on some level, there's a teeny tiny bit of fan service by getting the the woman who's playing Anna, giving her more screen time, having her take out a zombie, all those things. But I think it could have been done a little bit better. I wasn't happy with the way the birth was done, whatever. But I would say, I think I told you this, Andy. My criticism here is that the show is coming across as an A- when it could be an A+.
Sure.
I still love it. I adore it. And if there's anyone who's been through trauma during the run of this first season, it's probably me with the schedule that happened in my IRL compared to like what's going on in the podcast. But yeah, I really feel like I'd like to see more variety in how people get bit next season. But I'm definitely going to be watching and podcasting next season because it's a great show. Didn't you say
it's a great show
that this got more views than the House of the Dragon, despite having one less episode?
Yes, that's correct. Has a broader viewership than House of the Dragon.
Just on a couple extra things that I noticed, which are kind of fun, a little lighter.
Yeah.
So, one thing we see the giraffe. Mm-hmm. And we notice Ellie's excitement around that and excitement around nature. And it's funny because the first thing that came to mind was life will find a way, right? From Jurassic Park.
Yep.
Nice.
Nice. Mirrors a lot of that. Mirrors some of the scenes that you see there with them feeding after a traumatic scene, actually, where the kid gets electrocuted. They go feed a long-necked dinosaur. So I saw similarities there, and that's kind of interesting. A little bit of a lull in the general atmosphere, and show you that, hey, even though there's all this craziness around, both from the human society way and also from the infected, there still is this good portion of the world that breathes and keeps developing and comes around. So that was cool.
That's exactly how I interpreted that scene too. Is I felt like the giraffe represented beauty, hope, and the renewal of nature. Like out of the chaos of what we've done to it, comes this glimmer of hope.
That was just the theme of the show. I think we talked about it in the beginning. The visuals of the show were really all about like nature reclaiming the world. Mm-hmm. And so seeing those giraffes in their herd, and it was a thriving herd, right?
Yeah.
So for some reason, cordyceps isn't chasing down other mammals. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because giraffes can run. They can run real fast. So there's that. And they can kick. You get kicked by a giraffe, it's over. It's over. I don't care if your body's being fueled by cordyceps or not. But they were thriving. And it's North America, so it's not like we have lions take them down. So it was fantastic to see that. Very fantastic to see Ellie's face. And
quick pause here.
Joel.
You said lions take him down. Were you referring to the Planet Earth scene of the giraffe running and a lion trying to chase it and eat it, and the giraffe kicking the lion? Did you get to see that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
I have seen that.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were making a reference to it because I was like, oh, if he hasn't seen it, it's amazing. I never knew how powerful giraffes were until I saw that.
Going back to Ellie's intent and Ellie's consent, she does say in that scene when they're on the roof looking at the giraffes, she does tell Joel, I'll follow you anywhere you go, but there's no halfway with this. We finish what we started, which to me says that Ellie accepts and does want to be the cure for humanity. She wants to go through with this thing that they've set out to do. And after we're done, then I'll go with you wherever you want, Joel.
Which makes it so great, because what's happening there is if you're Joel, you're like, she wants to be with me.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be separated by this thing where Marlene lied to her. If you're Marlene, you're like, she wants to save the world. This is what she wants. And so they're diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
But Joel's a better killer. And then on top of that, you get this idea that like, Ellie's like, I'll go with you anywhere.
Yeah.
And therefore I'm going to say, I believe you. But she also wants to do what she needs to do to save what she can to save humanity, because she knows what she has is unique and she's lost people to this thing. Yes. So she wants to save humanity. but does she know the cost? And at 14, even if she knows the cost, right? Yes, she's lost her innocence with David. She's a woman. If she were a Catholic and she were confirmed, she'd be a woman. If she was a Jewish person and she had been bat mitzvahed, she'd be a woman. But at 14, are you able to make that choice? Right?
Right.
It's a wonderful question because in like I just mentioned, two traditional societies, choices would be made by you at a certain age. But like at 14, can you make can you even make the choice? You have a guardian at 14. And in this case, the guardian is it Joel or is it Marlene? So that's the brilliance of this episode, you know? And it's also awesome that, like, I know that we talked about how they merged the first 2 episodes into the pilot. So we ended up with 9 episodes.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just beautiful that they could get all this done in 9 episodes.
Yeah. A couple other things. When Ellie's looking out on to the giraffes, she says, you can't deny that view, which is a callback to the first time she saw the Boston skyline from the roof.
Yep.
That's also in the game. I love, speaking of fan service and the ladder. Yes. So having Joel boost Ellie so that she could drop down the ladder, completely unnecessary for the narrative, I think, other than to give Ellie a little bit of time to notice the giraffe and run off ahead. But it was just a beautiful fan service moment towards the game mechanics and a perfect time to bring that in. I just love that because as game players, we didn't get too much of that. And those things are really not really crucial in telling the story, but it's nice. It's nice to have that in there. It's a nod to the players, which I love.
Yeah, which is respect for the people who made this story compelling enough to get on HBO in the first place.
Yes. When she says, "Oh my God," so the biggest moment, the moment for me that my heart burst like completely wide open and just I was a hot mess was when Ellie says, "So time heals all wounds, I guess." And Joel says to Ellie, "It wasn't time that did it." Oh my God. I mean, what a great way to say I love you without saying I love you, right?
And it was good. It was very good writing. And also, like, this is another powerful aspect of, I'm a book reader. I love books. I love them. But the way that you can just pull that off on screen, it's the reason why people like you are so in love with movies, because you can only do that kind of storytelling on screen.
Right.
Right. And only with excellent actors, which we have 2 of, and only with excellent writing. And then you put it all together and you end up with that moment and you're just like, oh. Right.
One last plot hole that I noticed, not plot hole, but I guess plot hole. But I'm not sure when they're just before they're apprehended. I'm not sure why the team that is armed with the guns drawn on Joel and Ellie use a grenade on them instead of just apprehending them at gunpoint. I think
the flashbang.
Yeah, like the only reason I can think of.
I know why.
Why?
What's the only reason?
The only reason I can think of is so that they can separate them without having a discussion, without having a verbal interaction, so that they're.
Oh.
So that Joel wakes up and he's in the room and he hasn't talked to Ellie and Ellie hasn't talked to Joel and nobody has talked to the Fireflies firsthand. It's like a plot contrivance.
So I think of it because if you're gonna have a patrol, you've got your giraffes, you've got whatever's going on in your one. They're like in like a relatively like low. It's a high priority facility for them.
Mm-hmm. So
you can't simply just shoot people who are there. You have to know why they're there.
Right. So you hold them at gunpoint. I've got guns drawn. They've already have guns drawn on them.
The thing about it was they've got guns drawn on them and their backs are to them. if you scream like, freeze, whatever, you just don't know what's going to happen. But because of the sensitivity of that facility, my headcanon rationalization, you're like, we should find out why they're here. Or, they know that Ellie's on their way. I mean, Marlene is there already. Marlene's like, I sent Joel to come here.
Yeah.
We got to capture these people. I mean, like, we got to get these people. So they're like, they know not to like just shoot questions and shoot first and ask questions later. They know not to do that because they're looking for a package. So they need the intelligence for that package, and that package is person. So like, there are ways to rationalize it, but I have to admit, you make a great point. They wanted to find a way to separate Joel and Ellie without a lot of discussion, without a lot of Joel, Ellie,
right.
Joel, Ellie.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So guys, final thoughts about the entirety of season 1 of The Last of Us?
I really enjoyed this series. I think, the way I explain it to folks who haven't seen it is it's not necessarily about zombies or infected. It's about human dynamics and how people react and how people deal with love and what it means to sacrifice and survive in a and I'm going to say pandemic.
Sure.
And so pandemic / new society. So from that perspective, I think the show did a brilliant job telling this story, adapting this game, and I think we can all agree this is probably the best adaptation that we've seen of a game to date.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just, while there are things that it's not perfect, right? I don't think it's perfect, but I think it does an amazing job, and I'm glad to see this story come to a close. I know that when it comes to the next story, there are definitely people who have issues with what that is, and who knows how and what that will transform. But at least this, as a standalone chapter, I think is really well done, and I'm happy that we could go through this journey. It's a tale I'm glad that we made a podcast about, because you never know, right?
Right.
We've done some shows where they've had highs and lows, and for the most part, this has been a pretty good high.
Yeah. Dwayne, how about yourself? What are your final thoughts about the entirety of season 1?
I would say that it has some crazy high notes. I've got some my criticisms, but I would say that overall, if you're looking for prestige television, this is it. It hits on all the notes of a fantastic drama, and yet it has the speculative fiction element, and along with the performances and everything. So I feel like it's really great. I loved the themes that were initialized and given foundation and maintained. Like we talked about the giraffes and how they were a nice payoff to the idea of nature taking over. We talked about how Joel lost Sarah and now he has Ellie, but Ellie is not a replacement for Sarah. We've talked about how the incredible way the foundation was dug for Joel to be the person he was in this last episode. So again, subtly mentioning how dangerous he was, suddenly mentioning you don't want to be on his wrong side, you don't want to have him owe you anything, and then showing you how just incredibly destructive the man can be with not even his own firearms, but other people's. And I loved Ellie. I think that Bella Ramsey's interpretation of Ellie was more compelling than that of the video game. Ellie is this character who doesn't need to be, she doesn't need to be like anything other than what she is. Her audience is not the male gaze. Her audience is not, what we typically think of as like characters in video games. She just kind of is, and it seems like it's a whole like quest to like protect this escort quest, which is a big thing in video games. But her character grows and grows and grows to these points we were talking about today, where she's perhaps absorbed everything she can from Joel, and now she's ready to move on, or not, So I think that Bella Ramsey's Ellie. Also, like, we met Bella Ramsey in Game of Thrones as Lyanna Mormont.
Yep.
And that was one character. I mean, this character just shows that the young woman's got range. You know what I mean?
Yep.
She's got serious range.
Yep.
And that's great. So I was really a fan of the show, and I look forward to seeing more of it. And I can't deny that I look forward to every Sunday seeing what was going to go on. Yeah. What about you, Andy?
Yes. So I sound like a little bit of a broken record here, but I have to say this is arguably the best adaptation of prestige video game property that I've ever seen. And that's not to diminish things like Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Mario Brothers, which are fun, but I think this is something that is reaching for a more profound note. And I think that the reason why this works so well is because of the combined curation of Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, who decided that if it's not broken, let's not fix it, and where it is broken or where we can improve on it, let's plus it, let's do it better. And I think they already had a pretty watertight narrative to begin with, and they instinctively followed that narrative pretty closely. So this is why I have not played The Last of Us Part 2, Tosin, and I understand that there is a contingent of people who are not entirely happy about some of the things that go on in that game, but I will say that I feel confident about what they're going to do with Part 2, because I feel as long as they continue their idea of not changing what works and fixing what does and improving on what does, then I think that they already know the pitfalls that they got looking forward to in Part 2. So I think they're going to be okay. And I'm looking forward to joining them once again on this journey. I'm looking forward to everybody joining us on deconstructing these episodes. The big question for me is, since I have not played Part 2, I don't know at this point whether or not I'm going to catch up with the game by either playing it or watching a playthrough, or go in blind. I have a choice now. I have a choice to watch this blind with everyone else who hasn't played the game and experience these episodes as a neophyte. So I'm curious about what your choice you guys are going to make as well.
But Andy, do you really have a choice? Because what I've learned from this game is that decision has already been made for you by Joel. So
right,
you just gonna have to accept it.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely trust the showrunners, and from all that they've said and all their interviews and how they've explained things, I think super talented. But I think I'm also fine with it. Like, if there was not a second season, I would be fine too, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm comfortable with what this is as its own thing, right? It can sit on its own pedestal, and I'm good with that too. So, yeah. But as far as the second game, I already know more than enough to be dangerous. So I will probably be the individual who will revisit, look at all the things that go through and see where their changes are. So I can take that mantle, Andy.
All right. I'll let you do that, and I'll wonder about my choices as we get closer and closer to it. Speaking of, let's talk about some ephemera, which are links and extra textual connections that help enhance your enjoyment of this episode and this season. So I love that HBO did this. The moment that they released this last episode 9, they also released a half-hour making of special covering the entire season, which is on HBO, and we'll put a link to that in our show notes. You should definitely see it. It's a lot of fun. And I normally would not recommend to other people that they listen to other podcasts about The Last of Us, because I think ours is pretty special. But the episode that the official Last of Us podcast, which is hosted by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, the episode that covers this episode 9, is pretty interesting too, because it's they talk about some of the motivational stuff that we talked about. Their guest on this episode is Ashley Johnson, and she talks about Anna and how special it was to adapt her portrayal of Ellie for the show as well. And they also go into some stuff that they are aiming for season 2. So you get a little bit of a preview of what to look forward to in season 2. So I recommend that, and I will link that in our show notes as well. So the entire podcast episode. Guys, what else do you have as far as stuff to recommend other people check out?
One, I mentioned Hard Boiled, which is a crazy movie that I definitely think is worth watching. Before I describe it, have you guys seen Hard Boiled?
I've seen Hard Boiled, yeah. Classic okay. John Woo HK action movie, action thriller.
So it's a 1992 Hong Kong action thriller, and there's not really much that needs to be said. It's really an undercover agent tries to shut down a mobster, and there's this crazy fight scene in a hospital. So definitely check that out. Another one that I'm sure most of you have most likely seen if you're listening to this is Jurassic Park. We just referenced a little bit of the dinosaur.
I've heard of it.
Craziness, yes. That is Jurassic Park. That's actually also is that 1992? No, 1993 film. So we're moving up a year. Directed by Steven Spielberg.
I've heard of him,
and
too.
Then finally, depending on how much gets through here, there is Dwayne did talk about a giraffe and lion fight. Well, you can actually catch that Planet Earth 2 clip, which is pretty spectacular. So I will we'll toss up a link there. Watch that if you haven't.
Nice. All right, well, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Quarantine Zone. I'm going to go around the table, and I'll start with you, Dwayne. Where can people find your work on the internet when you're not here talking about The Last of Us?
Check me out on Twitter, twitter.com/DwayneD. And I guess look for what we do at Deep Geek Media. Tosin, what about you?
You can find me on twitter.com/toast4321. You can also find a lot of my photography on Instagram at burnttoast45. That's 2 T's in the middle. What about yourself, Andy?
You can find me at Mr. Babyman. That is my internet handle on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And you can find everything that I'm liking and linking throughout there. Our own show, Quarantine Zone, our Twitter and Facebook, our QZ Pod. We're on all major podcast distribution networks. Please add us, tell your friends. If you enjoyed how we've covered this entire season of Last of Us, spread the word so we can have a stronger listener base for season 2. We're going to sign off from the podcast for a while, but please stay subscribed for occasional updates as we anticipate the return of Last of Us Part 2. Until then, please drop us an email or tweet us, leave us a comment on iTunes, and that is going to do it for The Last of Us, and that is going to do it for us here on Quarantine Zone. And we will see you guys in Part 2, Season 2.